tobacco offering to well-renowned Algonquin elder Annie Smith St. George's. She has over 35 years of experience offering openings and closings at countless high-profile events and doing advocacy work in the Indigenous and disability communities. Annie was chosen as the Algonquin elder to perform the opening and closing ceremonies for the reopening of the Commission on the Residential School Victims at Rideau Hall. And amongst her many other accomplishments is her appointment as the home elder at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa. I'm humbled to invite Algonquin elder Annie Smith St. George's to open our event today.
Quickly, Annie Smith St. George, Kishkwanagwada de Kas, Kidganzi Bio Jiba, Nikichikajaminwadam, Kwawak, Niniwak, Wasanjmanogam, Bijashika Nishnabe, Algonkinaki, Biage, Kokamisbug, Imishomisbug, Kibig, Wasanjma Atawang, Getsno, Outaouais, Nipissing jusqu'à Three Rivers, Kichizibi Mega. Welcome, all of you. I greet you on the Algonquin, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people, the Anishinaabe people. Welcome to all of you. I'm happy to meet you and to greet you on this land of my ancestors, the land of my great-grandmothers who traveled this territory, the Ottawa, the Gatineau, the Outaouais, Nipissing, right up to the Three Rivers area. Ça me fait plaisir de vous accueillir sur le grand territoire.
I'm very happy to welcome you on the unceded territory, Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. It is unceded territory. My great-grandparents, grandmothers lived in Ottawa, close to Parliament Hill, and they traveled within the territory here, where we are here today.
Where my great-grandmothers were living at the Parliament area, on the grounds in Major Hill, and here exactly where we're sitting at the moment. They were pushed away into Oka region. But that is history that is coming along now. That is why I am here to greet you all with a warm welcome to the territory. You know, before we move on with the acknowledgement and the prayers, as you would say, a prayer or an acknowledgement, we thank what we have. I'd like to address a few issues of Indigenous issues in the areas, all the area within the region. We have people with disabilities, Indigenous people. They are accommodated, but sometimes an Indigenous person will shy out and they will not come forth to ask their needs and what they need. In the medical field, we were always segregated and marginalized And therefore, we were taught to be quiet. We were shunned, we were quiet. And so it's very difficult, like myself, I'm disabled. I had a car injury. My left arm, my right arm is, my dominant arm doesn't work. Right, the nerve systems. I had a car injury. Also, at this moment in time, I could understand the visual impaired because I'm partially in visual impaired for the moment due to, till I get my operation, I do not see anyone clearly today. So I do have, I'm aware of that. Also, you know, I was thinking back when I was approached by an alien organization. What is most needed? I think there's a lack of understanding people who are on wheelchairs or lack accessibility. And when I was situated at one point in time in a wheelchair, not permanently, but due to my injuries, I had a hard time in bathrooms where everything was high and still not problem solved. There's a lot of things that we can't do, like go up the stairs. We're not easy to get upstairs. We have to have ways to improve our housing and in different areas that we address. Also, I want to address, especially yesterday, I was on a committee to the non-visual disability is the eyesight or what you can see as a disability. And I want to look at another one that it's not visual. It's the one that you call dyslexia and other, what you would call learning disabilities. I suffered as a young person and shamed because I was belittled as a child. Belittled of having this different ability, a different ability to be able to read or even to write, mainly to write. I would reverse my sentences or my words sometimes, reverse them. Because in Algonquin, it's get straight to the point. You want something, get there. There's no, it's a very direct language in a few words. And in that, the verb could come before the sentence or after. It doesn't matter as long as you get the job done. And there's different ways, different tones, different ways of you addressing how you speak. That was never considered. They belittled me at school. They laughed at me. They did not treat me well. Emotionally, I became traumatized to a point where I was unable to speak and I stuttered. I developed a stuttered problem. And this problem created a lot of problems. Not only that I had it as a child, I brought it into my young person to work. I was so insecure at work that I never told anybody that I had this problem because I was afraid to be shamed. And yes, I was shamed on what I was doing. A corrective measures was always done on me. And that didn't help my empowerment to move forward. However, today I'm opening up for the first time, telling people you could call it dyslexia. Maybe I am a dyslexic person. I was evaluated as a dyslexic person at 45. And at the age of 45, when they tell you you got dyslexia, I said, what does that mean? They say, all you do is you don't see the world the same way as we do. What does that mean? It stunned me. And so you learn to, that's another belittling factor, you see. And now you're confused. It's a language barrier. It is literally now proven a language barrier. Most Indigenous people have what you would consider dyslexia, which it's not maybe the real because it's genetically passed down. Okay. Anyways, so these are areas where the Indigenous people are having difficulties, but also they're having difficulties when they have different abilities. I would like to say it's a different ability. They have visual abilities. They have visual non-ability, the non-visual abilities, and they don't say it unless it's seen that you're on a wheelchair and you have problems, or they see it visually. But these are all adaptable to workforces today, luckily. But yet we still have to improve in the workforces to be accepted and not to be discriminated of who we are and where we come from. We all have a capacity to do our jobs in some way, some form. And there's another one that I would like to address is the children. I know of a young woman called Angel, and I always bring her with me wherever I go. Angel is an Indigenous young woman at the age of 20, beautiful young girl, beautiful young woman. But she has a mental mind of a 6, 7-year-old. The mother, who is now ill, like getting older and having a hard time. And I'm talking First Nations here. I'm talking Indigenous people here. She had the hardest time to have help. But she's also fearful if something would happen to her. And if her child is placed, that she will be sexually or maybe physically harmed. An angel is innocent child. There is a Jordan principle that's out, but it stops at the age of 18, and afterwards they're on their own as an adult. I think that's very important that we should look at all these factors. How many of our children out there, including non-Indigenous, other cultures, that have that same situation where they have children that mentally are 7, 8 years old, but they're in a body of a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old person. and yet not getting the proper health. I think there's a lot of things in this forum that we must address together in unity. And I think that we should address it seriously because it does demand a lot on a family. And so together, ensemble, on peut travailler pour
Together,
améliorer
we can work to improve the situation.
et des personnes sont incapables de faire des
But
choses.
because people are able to move
C'est
forward,
une autre habilité.
it's another capacity.
Disability, always like it's a dis, is negative. Ability. Let's call it another ability or a different ability. Let's find another terminology to disability, please. Handicapé en français.
In French, we use the word handicapped.
Quand t'es handicapé, quand
So
tu
where
vas
you
au
are in this
magasin,
situation
tu
and
peux
you're
pas
going to a
manger.
store,
Puis
it's very
c'est pas vu
difficult.
de la même façon.
You're never seen the
Il y a
same way, you know.
discrimination
You're facing
encore
discrimination.
vers les personnes qui ont
It
les
is still
handicaps.
present against people, handicapped people.
Ça, c'est juste mes expériences.
This
Mes
is only my
observations
experience,
que je
my
voulais faire,
observations.
de commencer une bonne
This is what I'm
dialogue
sharing with you.
ensemble. It is
I
only
think we
my
have to
experience,
talk together.
my personal experience, my personal growth. I know I could talk for 3-4 days on this issue, even one issue of vulnerability, which is dyslexia and others. But anyways, I could talk days and days of how I was abused and not treated well. That's why reconciliation exists today. Now, in good communication and good dialogue, we've already made some advances in it. But yet in a public service, yes. But in the regular companies, we still have a lot of work to do in hiring. Because they're quick to decide or judge. But we have a lot of community members that could help and a lot of people. So let's work together to be able to improve and so that we have a better quality of life for everyone, including Indigenous people. And as I go on, je remercie le Créateur. I thank the Creator
Oh,
for providing us this beautiful, wonderful day with the sunlight and the rain that we need, and also with the water we drink, the foods that we eat, the fish, the water, the animals, the water, the four-leggeds, everything we have, the beautiful flowers that we have, the vegetation, all vegetation on earth. Without the bees, without the insects, without the crawlers, without the little insects, we cease to exist. So I thank the Creator for all these great gifts and the beauty of us being here together. We are the final touch, the beauty of Mother Earth. We have a good mind to think. Some have the capacity to see. We could be able to see beautiful things. We also have a mouth to communicate, if we could communicate. The listen is also something that we develop. If we could, we have to thank you to do so. I thank everyone coming here together very great numbers of you, un grand nombre de vous autres, de venir participer.
Thank you so much for being here to participate in this discussion. And it's been so long, we're always coming back to the same topics.
Of discussion. I thank the Creator for all the gifts that we have a voice. We are given that voice, and we must use it in a good way and in a respectful way so that we work together and we start to speak of who we are. Miigwech. I was very honored to be here to do the opening, the greet, and I'm very happy to see you all here. Miigwech, for inviting me. Everybody here. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Algonquin Elder Annie Smith St. George, for your opening and for sharing us. It was an honor to hear your story and your messages as part of today's event, where connection, respect, and inclusion are a central focus. Thank you again. I'd like to recognize that I am a white settler who lives in Ottawa, which is built on the unceded, unsurrendered Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. Je tiens à souligner que je suis issue d'une lignée de colons blancs et habite à Ottawa.
I would like to emphasize that I come from a lineage of white settlers and that I live in Ottawa, a city built on unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin territory.
Lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Indigenous scholars recognize that the idea of disability from a medicalized perspective does not exist within many Indigenous cultures. Rather, many embrace the gifts and diversity of each individual within an interconnected and interdependent community. In our work to increase accessibility across our city, may we be mindful of the interrelations and interdependence of all of us and work towards reconciliation and ensuring the voices, perspectives, and experiences of Indigenous people with disabilities are an integral part of our work. We commit to the ideal of an inclusive society based on respect and understanding, where Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Inuit, Métis with disabilities are recognized, celebrated, and valued for their significant contributions that they provide to our communities, organizations, and city. Again, I encourage you to be mindful of the land we are on today and consider your own role in reconciliation and inclusion. Thank you. Merci, miigwech. I'm very excited to welcome to our event today Deputy Mayor Marty Carr, who is also Councillor Liaison to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, Wendy Stephenson, our City Manager, Vanya Karam and Dr. Hall Ellingwood, Chair and Vice Chair of our Accessibility Advisory Committee, Sonia Bebbington, CEO of Ottawa Public Library, Tara Blasioli, Manager of Design and Construction for Adasoke, and Leslie Weir, Librarian and Archivist of Canada, and our keynote speaker, Rick Hansen. I'd also like to welcome and thank members of our City Council and our senior leadership team for attending today. I saw Councillor King and Councillor Tierney. I see Councillor Troster. Am I missing anyone? And I see from our senior leadership team, Dan Chenier, General Manager of Recreation, Culture, and Facility Services, Hélène Gontier, General Manager of Public Works, Debbie Stewart, General Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Caitlin Salter McDonald, our City Clerk. Did I miss anyone? It's kind of like romper room. I'm an 80s kid, so when I say young-ish and then I say romper room, we understand. I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome the Chief Accessibility Officer of Canada, Stephanie Cadieux, who is joining us today. Very happy to have you all in attendance. Thank you. Every year, starting on the last Sunday in May, Canadians celebrate National Accessibility Week. Founded as National Access Awareness a Week in 1988 and inspired by Rick Hansen's Man in Motion World Tour, this week is an opportunity to celebrate Canadians with disabilities and raise awareness of the critical need for accessibility and inclusion for all in our communities and workplaces. La Journée de l'accessibilité à Ottawa is célébrée chaque année pendant
Ottawa
la Semaine
Accessibility Day
nationale
at
de
Ottawa is
l'accessibilité
celebrated every year during
et
National
inspirée
Accessibility
par la
Week.
Journée mondiale Man in Motion de Rick
This is
Hansen.
inspired by Man in
Cette
Motion from
initiative
Eric Hansen.
visant à souligner
This
les
initiative
contributions des personnes en
celebrates the
situation
contribution
de
of people
handicap
with
et à
disabilities
promouvoir
and
l'inclusion
promotes
et
inclusion
l'accessibilité
and
dans les
accessibility
communautés et les
in
lieux de
communities
travail
and
à l'échelle
workplaces
du Canada.
across Canada.
The theme of our event this year is reflecting on history, building an accessible future together, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing more from our keynote speaker, Rick Hansen, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of his Man in Motion tour, and to learn about the work his foundation is doing to ensure accessible design in our public buildings and infrastructure. I would now like to invite Deputy Mayor Marty Carr to speak and present the proclamation.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous, and welcome to
Hello,
the City
everyone.
of Ottawa's Accessibility Day. It's an honor to be here on behalf of His Worship, Mayor Mark Sutcliffe. For those that cannot see me, I'd like to offer a brief description of myself. I'm a slightly more than middle-aged white woman with brown and gray shoulder-length hair, wearing a brightly colored striped dress with a blue cardigan. It's great to be here as we commemorate National Accessibility Week in Canada and Accessibility Day here in Ottawa. It is fantastic to see many of you here in the room today, so thank you all for taking the time to be with us. Merci à toutes les personnes présentes dans la
Thank you very
salle.
much to everyone together.
And for those of you watching via live stream, welcome and thank you for joining in. This week is a time to celebrate the contributions of people with disabilities and to renew our collective commitment to creating a more accessible, inclusive, and barrier-free Ottawa. It is also a time to reflect on the work we've done and the work that still lies ahead. As Councillor Liaison to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, I can attest that accessibility is not just treated as a checklist here in the city. It is a core value that shapes the way we build our city, design our public spaces, and deliver our programs and services. Ottawa is proud to be a city that champions universal design, ensuring that our public buildings, sidewalks, transit systems, and parks are welcoming and inclusive to everyone. Whether it's a tactile walking surface indicator at an intersection, a universally designed recreation facility, or the provision of accessible formats and communication supports for everything the city produces, each of these is a step towards a city that reflects the dignity and diversity of all who call it home, in addition to our staff and visitors. Today's event offers us the opportunity to learn from one another, to hear from leaders in accessibility and with lived experience, like Rick Hansen, who we'll hear from soon, promise. I would also like to take this time to thank all members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Since 2023, I have had the great honor of working closely with this group of people who are truly dedicated to creating a city that is accessible to all. Over the past year, I've witnessed the thoughtfulness, passion, and leadership that each member of the committee brings to the table. Their work not only strengthens our policies, it also strengthens our community. Le travail des membres du comité consultatif sur l'accessibilité.
The work of these members reinforce our policies, but as well our
The Accessibility
communities.
Advisory Committee is currently made up of 15 members from the community who bring both lived experience and professional expertise related to disability to the table. Their voices are essential to our progress. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to each member for their service, their insight, and their time. Committee Chair, Vanya Karam. Committee Vice Chair, Dr. Hall Ellingwood. Wayne Antle. Ian Burry. Susan Cowan. Ana Maria Cruz Valderrama. Ryan Duchoni. Matthew Elliott. Jody Fisher. David Humphreys. Murray McDonald. Paula McDonald. Anne Matteo. William Van Veen. Hannah Walhad. Thank you all. The committee meets at least 8 times a year, and many members also contribute to working groups and subcommittees across the city. Their commitment and engagement are exceptional. L'engagement des membres du comité
Their
est
engagement
remarquable.
is
Over the
exceptional.
course of the past year, the committee provided feedback on numerous important initiatives, including the multi-use pathway between the Ottawa Hospital and the Dow's Lake LRT station, the use of push-button doors on the O train, Lansdowne 2.0 Phase 1, including the accessibility design of the new event center and north side stands, updates to the traffic and parking bylaw with a focus on on-street accessible parking, the city's ongoing e-scooter pilot project, and consultations for the new City of Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan. These consultations ensure that accessibility is embedded in the planning, design, and execution of major city projects. And under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AODA, the committee also participates in the annual Duty to Consult meeting on matters such as accessible parks, passive travel, including trails, facilities, and parking. It is difficult to really quantify the number of volunteer hours they put in, but what is clear is the profound and lasting impact of their work. Again, to each member of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, thank you. I'll just add that I find it extremely valuable as a councillor to participate in these meetings. And just a small example, on Monday, when I was participating in the consultations, one of the things that I feel passionate about, in addition to accessibility, is our housing and homelessness situation. And one of the members brought to my attention that we have no accessible shelter beds in this city. So this group is so valuable, their contributions, and it's a real privilege to participate. You're really helping us remove physical, social, and attitudinal barriers across the city. Thanks to your efforts, city staff and council are better equipped to create a built environment and service culture that is equitable and inclusive for all persons with disabilities. I look forward to continuing this important work with you in the months and years ahead. Je me réjouis à l'idée de poursuivre avec vous
I'm
ce
happy
travail
to be able to
essentiel
continue
au cours des
this work
prochains mois et
over
des
the
prochaines
next
années.
months and years.
As part of today's event, I would now like to take a moment to make a special announcement regarding Atasoki, the new Ottawa Public Library and Library and Archives Canada joint facility. Just recently, the project team received the pre-construction accessibility certification from the Rick Hansen Foundation for this facility, and they will also be striving to receive the same for post-construction certification once the building is completed. Congratulations on this tremendous achievement and commitment. Some of the accessible features the facility will include are ample quantity of accessible parking spaces beyond the minimum standards, nearby access to public transit with the Pimisi LRT station a short distance away, access to all floors with multiple elevators, over 80 touchless automated door operators throughout the facility, universal washrooms on each floor, emergency systems with visual and audible fire alarms in both public and staff-only areas, tactile walking directional in the exterior sidewalk to the building entrance, directories and elevators, tactile markings for building directories and room identification signs, and assistive listening and communication enhancement technologies in the auditorium, theater, and civic reception areas. And this is just a short list of the many other accessible features this facility will have. Atasoki will be a hub to our community, and I know I speak on behalf of all of my council colleagues that we are very excited to welcome the community to this space. It is now my honor to invite up to the podium Sonia Bevington, CEO of Ottawa Public Library, Tara Blasioli, Manager of Design and Construction for Atasoki, and our special guest and today's keynote speaker, Rick Hansen, Paralympian, humanitarian, and founder of the Rick Hansen Foundation, who will be receiving today's proclamation. Yeah, sorry about that. I miss Leslie Weir, who's from Library and Archives Canada. Apologies, who's also coming up. I promise you I'm almost done reading. So we'll read the proclamation, and I will present to and I'll just read it out. Whereas each year, National Accessibility Week in Canada is an opportunity to celebrate the valuable contributions of persons with disabilities in building a more inclusive and equitable society. And whereas this week is recognized across the country by individuals and organizations who play a vital role in identifying and eliminating discrimination, marginalization, exclusion, and barriers affecting people with disabilities, and attendu que la Ville d'Ottawa s'engage à offrir un accès
Whereas the
équitable,
City of Ottawa is committed to provide equitable, respectful, and inclusive access with programs, services, and facilities, this year's theme, Reflecting on History, Building an Accessible Future Together, emphasizes the importance of lived experience and shared leadership in advancing accessibility.
Marks the 40th anniversary of the Man in Motion World Tour, a historic milestone in Canada's journey towards accessibility, and the city is honored to welcome Rick Hansen as the keynote speaker for the 22nd Accessibility Day, while also highlighting the release of its new municipal accessibility plan, OC Transpo's first accessibility plan, and the continued commitment to achieve Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility certification for Atasoki, the city's new central library branch, and home to the main location for Library and Archives Canada's public services. Therefore, I, Marty Carr on behalf of Mark Sutcliffe, do hereby proclaim May 29th, 2025 Accessibility Day in Ottawa. I'd just like to confirm it is Mark Sutcliffe's signature on the proclamation, however. I don't do that, but thank you very much. To close, I just want to thank the event organizers, our accessibility office for putting together this amazing event, as well as our community partners and all of you, our residents, visitors, employees, and advocates for celebrating with us. So thank you, everyone, and I wish you all a great Accessibility Day.
You took my notes again. I can't leave my notes here.
Did I read yours out too? It did seem a bit long. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm
going to keep them with me now. I'll take them with me next time I sit down. Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor Carr, for being here today. You're a great advocate for accessibility and helping advance the priorities of our AAC members. So we're very excited to have you as part of our event. I'd also like to echo my excitement regarding Atasoke, home of the new central branch of Ottawa Public Library and main location for Library and Archives Canada's services, receiving the pre-construction certification from the Rick Hansen Foundation, and what this will mean for our residents and visitors for many years to come. This is a significant achievement for all involved in the project and is a testimony of what great partnerships can achieve. And I want to share my congratulations to the project team for their continuing efforts. I'd now like to invite City Manager Wendy Stephenson to say a few words.
A huge thank you to our MC this morning, Megan. And good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here. Bonjour à tous. For those of you who cannot see me, I pretend to be a middle-aged woman. I'm probably a little bit older than that. I am a white female. I have dark brown hair with a little bit of gray coming through, and I am wearing a black suit with a red shirt this morning. And I'm very happy to be here today to celebrate our 22nd Accessibility Day here at City Hall. And the organizers today have put together a fantastic event. And I just want to take a moment and I want to say thank you to everybody who took a hand and helped put together the event today. So let's give them a round of applause. This year's theme is Reflecting History, Building Accessible Future Together. And this aligns perfectly with our commitment across all city departments to create a more inclusive community for residents and visitors here in the city of Ottawa. And we're very much looking forward to learning more about this from our keynote speaker, Rick Hansen, who's here. And I had the opportunity just a little bit earlier to welcome him to our city, and we're just so happy to have you here. So thank you, Rick, for taking the time to join us today, and we're looking forward to you sharing your thoughts. And as city manager, I've had a unique opportunity, and I know firsthand in terms of the tremendous amount of work that we do to ensure that our projects and programs and services incorporate accessibility from the start. And I see the very positive outcomes of this work from our residents, from our staff, and our community. And these efforts, whether seen in the design of accessible infrastructure, the delivery of inclusive programs or services, or the consideration of diversity in our day-to-day operations, are shaping our city where everybody can participate fully and equitably. And creating an accessible Ottawa is not the work of one department or one individual. It is a collective effort. And it's this dedication, innovation, and collective efforts that are helping us get there step by step and project by project. And I want to say a huge thank you to all of my colleagues, including our senior leaders, our management, especially staff from our accessibility working group, for your continued leadership and for always keeping accessibility top of mind. This work reflects the very best of what it means to be part of Team Ottawa and reinforces our commitment to service excellence. And some of the team efforts are being showcased outside in our resource fair. So please do take an opportunity to visit and drop in and see the amazing work that's happening here after the ceremony today. And each year, Council receives an update on our municipal accessibility plan, in addition to our new OC Transpo accessibility plan. And the progress of these plans is reported on an annual basis and measures our achievements and highlights where improvements are needed. And these plans really reinforce our commitment and the city's commitment to accessibility, and it reminds us of the benefits of meeting or exceeding the provincial or federal standards to ensure that all of our programs and services are accessible to all residents. And today, I want to take a bit of an opportunity to highlight some of these achievements in accessibility that we have reached in the past year. And at last year's Accessibility Day, we announced the official kickoff to our public engagement sessions that helped develop our new municipal accessibility plan. And over the spring and summer of 2024, staff received feedback from hundreds of individuals across our city and considered that, they recorded that in terms of putting together the 2025 to 2029 Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan, which we know is COMAP. And that officially launched on January 1st of this year. And in addition to our new COMAP, staff also used all that feedback and comments about accessible public transit to inform the very first creation of our OC Transpo Accessibility Plan, which is a new requirement under the federal government's Accessible Canada Act. And with both plans, hundreds of actions are going to ensure that our residents, our employees, and our visitors receive accessible customer service, are provided accommodations in the workplace, and have access to accessible features with our public infrastructure and can take public transit without barriers. And our deputy mayor just announced one key example with Atasoke, and I think we're just all so proud of that achievement today. And this milestone recognizes that accessibility was integrated from the very earliest of phases in the design and planning. And the project team remains committed to also achieving post-construction certification, which will ensure accessibility is verified and maintained once that building is complete and once it's opened. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the other work that has happened over the last little while here at the city with our asset management team. And they have been making accessibility improvements at many of our facilities. And just a couple of examples, and some of them you might actually see when you're here today. We have renovated washrooms right here in City Hall. We've also done renovated washrooms at Ben Franklin Place and the Nepean Sportsplex. We've provided upgrades to provide accessible change rooms at our Rayfield Recreation Complex. And we've got accessible ramp installations or improvements both at the Wellington Street Senior Center as well as the Richelieu-Vanier Community Center. Engaging with people with disabilities continues to be an ongoing priority for our accessibility office. And through ongoing conversations and consultation sessions with representatives from a wide range of disability organizations, staff are actively listening, they're learning, and they're expanding their understanding of diverse needs within our community. And these sessions not only allow staff to respond directly to the questions or concerns about city infrastructure, our programs, our services, but they really provide valuable insights into emerging issues and evolving needs that help shape our future accessibility priorities here at the city. And we are deeply grateful to our community partners, our advocates, and organizations who dedicate their time and their expertise to this very important work. Your ongoing collaboration is vital in helping us build a city that is accessible and inclusive for everyone. And we are very aware, of course, that there is always more work to be done. Our work is shaped by your encouragement, advice, guidance, and perspectives. And your feedback helps inform our municipal decisions, which includes adopting or updating our policies to identify and remove barriers to accessibility. In closing, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our Corporate Accessibility Office for its leadership and guidance in driving this work here at the city. And I want to acknowledge and thank all of the city departments for their continued collaboration and shared commitment to accessibility. As we look ahead, we remain united in our efforts to build a more inclusive Ottawa for everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Accessibility Day. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Wendy. We really appreciate you taking the time to highlight some of the great work happening at the city. And we thank you for your continued leadership across the organization on this important priority. I'd now like to invite the Chair and Vice Chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, Vanya Karam, and Dr. Hall Ellingwood to share a few words about the achievements and goals of the committee.
So, hi, everybody. It's great to see a full house here today. Good morning et bonjour. I just want to say I'm really humbled and honored to be here. For those who can't see me, I have curly blonde hair and I'm wearing a flowery, flowy dress. I'm super shy, but I put on my extrovert cloak today. And the way to identify me is I am the one who's always smiling in the room. So I also was really excited to see my friend Tara today, who introduced me to our Chief Accessibility Officer for the Federal Public Service, Stephanie. So really great to meet you. And I also just want to say, I've been doing this role for over 6 years now. And through it, I've got to meet a bunch of city councilors as well as city staff. And I just think we have a really passionate and caring group of people leading our city. And I think we're really lucky. So I just wanted to say that. So a happy Accessibility Day, everybody. I'm gonna try to speak French, so have patience. Je suis ici aujourd'hui.
I'm here today on behalf of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, who was set up under the Accessibility Act for Disabled People of Ontario. Our committee has a very useful role to play for prevention or elimination of obstacles to accessibility. Our volunteers meet regularly to hear city staff and other stakeholders from the public who want to ask questions or provide advice to reinforce accessibility in plans, initiatives, and strategies at the city. Thank you to our members for their constant commitment and their expertise.
The Act has one of its key goals to make Ontario more accessible, to ensure equal access for all. Today, I want to speak to the theme of building an accessible future together and what that means to me. I have always volunteered in the community. Well, always. I started at age 12 volunteering for the Ottawa Boys and Girls Club, the McCann unit, where my heart resides on MacArthur. And since then, I've always been a staunch community volunteer and advocate, and I always give my time. I really, really care about the people in my community and giving back. So through this work, I've been able to see how the citizens of Ottawa give back and make a difference. Someone who exemplified this was Ryan Lythall, who is a member of our community. He was a brilliant writer and advocate, and I was super sad to see that he passed away earlier this year at the very young age of 50. He spent his life speaking out for an inclusive and accessible city, and after spending the first 19 years of his life in CHEO, he became one of the very first people in Canada to live independently on a ventilator here in Centertown, Ottawa. He went to Algonquin College. He was active on the social scene, and he was a regular at events like Blues Fest and helped to make it more accessible. He led a life of activism and advocacy. He campaigned for improved paratransport services in the city, and he used his platform and his voice as a writer for the Ottawa Life magazine to speak out on really important issues that we still face today regarding housing, income, and healthcare. He was witty, and he brought a sense of humor, creativity, and intellectual prowess in every article that he wrote. He is very much missed by many people in this room, and he will be forever remembered. Now I would like to turn back to community building and another interesting project that I became aware of recently. It's not in Ottawa, but it's close by. I was there, I found out about it because I was at a bingo event for my cousin. It's the Almont Civitan Club, and it has taken on the ambitious goal of building an accessible playground in Almont. It has this community organization has a focus on building good citizenship, and its volunteers are undertaking a large-scale community project to build an accessible family playground in 2026, next year. It is being funded largely through donations from the public, and it's being organized through the efforts of community volunteers. And I think it's another great example of how the collective efforts of individuals who are giving back can bring about change and make our shared spaces better and more livable. I believe that these examples, among many of them that I know, are important to show how each of one of us can make a difference. And to that end, I want to encourage each of us to get involved. Find the time, show up, and be present. And I know for a fact that there's a ton of us in this room that do it. Thank you, Marty, for acknowledging the members of our committee. I also just want to give a shout out to Kyle, who's here, who's not on our committee, but gosh, he shows up at almost every meeting, and he's a really amazing advocate for the Ottawa art scene. And we just love you, Kyle. You're the best. Also, thanks to all my cheerleaders, especially Dave, who sent me a text encouraging me. Thanks, Dave. So I just want to say we all have a role to play to improve accessibility in our city. And in closing, as we look toward this year, 2025, and the future of accessibility, I want to encourage anybody who has an interest in disability, and I also am not a fan of the word disability. I wish there was another word to say. I really think actually having a disability gives you the ability to see, to be compassionate and towards ourselves and others, and to just make a difference. I wish we had another word for it. Maybe inclusion's a better word. And I also want to mention seniors, because our committee is not just about disabilities, it's also about seniors. And I think they're intrinsically linked, but I think sometimes seniors' issues get sidelined sometimes. So I just want to say that our committee is about both. Anyways, in the future, I want to encourage anyone who's interested to apply to serve with our committee. And also, if you just want to come out as a member of the public and speak, we'd love hearing from you. So working together, I think we can look beyond today's boundaries to see how each one of us individually can help support a more accessible future, and through that, a more inclusive community for our neighbors, family, and friends. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm going to do it with sign language as well. Both my great-grandparents were deaf, but I've lost a lot of my sign. So thank you on behalf of our committee and its members and everyone else here today for celebrating Accessibility Day with us. Thank you.
Oui, bonjour. Hello, everyone. Chair Karam mentioned how humbling it is, what an honor it is to be here today. It is. It's really such a privilege to be asked to speak to you, everyone, online as well as here in person. It's funny, for those few who know me, know that I have notes. I rarely stick to them. Chief Karam and some others mentioned the terms like disability and what's attached to them, because they're social constructs. There's certain words you'll rarely hear me say. You won't hear me say diversity too often because I'm not divergent from any standard. I'm distinct. You won't hear me talk about inclusion because inclusion into what? Exactly. A space where I'm normally not allowed to be in. where I'm normally not accepted, where I'm an exception rather than simply part of it. To me, I think about respect and fostering belonging. I think about dismantling what terms mean and making them mean what they need to mean to me. What they need to mean when I'm in relationship with anybody else in any type of conversation, so that I'm respecting their distinctiveness and I'm asking them to respect mine, because that fosters belonging. That's what real inclusion is to me. Now, switching to French briefly. Oh, before I do that, actually. I've also heard people describe themselves. I know sometimes that's useful to people, sometimes it's not. So for just a little bit of humor, I'll tell you what a friend insisted I say about several months ago at another speaking engagement after I lost the bet, of which the rule is never gamble. So before you is a silver fox. I may not be a man who is tall in stature, but I'm tall in heart. And I'm here very much as a person impassioned about advocacy, about how we build community, how we have and ensure that we forget no one, and how we help, how we provide services, how we create, how we develop. Switching now to French. La présidente du comité,
The chair of the committee has already talked about the importance of our work. She said that accessibility is not only a necessity, but it's a fundamental right that enriches the life of people. And that includes inclusion, and that reinforces communities. Today, I'd like to talk about something as important: having different voices to develop the work of committees like ours. We just went through a federal election, and that made me think a lot about the importance and the power of the multiplicity of voices. This is democracy at work, representation, and the need that the voices of some contribute to the decisions that have to do with the mass. Back to English.
Accessibility Advisory Committee. We recognize that true representation, it requires humility. As committee members, we acknowledge no single voice can capture the full spectrum of experiences, knowledge, or viewpoints. We all have different lived experiences, even if we have similar diagnoses, right? We all have different lived experiences, even if we have similar identities. One parent's experience is a different parent's experience. One Canadian's experience is a different Canadian's experience, etc. None of us sees through every lens, nor can we fully comprehend every challenge. That's precisely why our work is vital. It's why advisory committees like ours exist, because representation requires plurality. It needs different minds, different experiences, and the continuous evolution of voices that shape and reshape the conversation. And those conversations must result in meaningful action. Less performance, more action, right? Actions like more accessible parks, pathways, recreation centers, and more. And we have more work to do, as we all know, everyone in this room. I'm a person who's accomplished many things, and yet now at the end of a pandemic that made everything virtual, suddenly it's hard to get a job because people want someone who can physically be in the office or able to travel. And suddenly I find myself in a position that I was in just 5 years ago. The system, no system, wakes up wanting to change itself. That's why people, individuals, are so critical. It's the individuals that help change things, not a system. We're the ones who can change culture, and that requires persistence and perseverance. And I know it costs us. I know it does. And it's so worth persisting, because those changes change everything. Because members of this community, we're part of an ever-changing mosaic. Some people leave, new voices join. With each transition, we gain new perspectives, new expertise, a rich tapestry of lived experiences. These shifts don't weaken our mission, they strengthen it. And our work doesn't happen in isolation. Our meetings remain open to the public, welcoming delegates who bring forth concerns, ideas, and challenges we might not have encountered like on our own, things we might not have thought of because we haven't lived that experience. Every voice, every insight adds to collective aspiration, one shared dream that drives us forward, a more accessible city, a more accessible future. Now, in that future, it should be balanced. It should be boundless. And I don't use my shoulds lightly. It should be full of potential for every individual, not restricted by outdated barriers or assumptions about capability, for example. Leadership should reflect the richness of society, and that includes persons with disabilities in every space where decisions are made. There's no valid reason to exclude or limit our voices, our presence. Representation is not just about visibility. I'm not interested in tokenism. It's about empowerment. That's what true representation is. And ensuring that policies and systems work for everyone. I dream of a future where accessibility and representation are the standard, where it isn't just idealism, it's a necessity. The contributions of people with disabilities should not be viewed as exceptional or unusual, but as fundamental in every space in order to be a truly equitable country. If we want a society that's built on fairness and progress, then any leadership positions need to reflect that, including one of you potentially becoming prime minister. Because why not? Why not? Why not see us more in roles as senators, as ministers, in any and all levels of government, of organizations, of companies? We should be everywhere. We are the most untapped resource for employees. Not only can that future exist where we're everywhere, one that has us all in active parts in all parts of society. It's something that we must strive towards. It starts with believing in that dream unapologetically, and I do. I dream about that for us so strongly. Accessibility is not built by any one singular vision or voice. It's woven together by many. Look at everybody here today. It's refined and strengthened by debate, by collaboration, by listening, by learning from each other. And in that sharing of each, our unique distinctiveness, in that tapestry of perspectives, we move closer to a city that's accessible for everyone. So please, embrace a variety of voices, respect the richness of our experiences, and the understanding that together, not alone, we craft a better world. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you so much, Vanyan Hall. I always appreciate the passion that you bring to this topic, and I want to thank you both for making the time to be here today. Okay, so we're a little bit behind schedule, which is true to myself as a human being. Thank you for bearing with us. We're still going to take a 10-minute break to get Rick set up for his keynote speech. Please take the time to get a drink, use the washroom, connect with others. If you require any support, please ask one of our team members or connect with one of our PSWs. Before we go, our photographer has asked if everybody could just hold tight for about 30 seconds. We're going to ask our city manager and our members of council who are present today for a quick photo in front of the audience. And then we'll take a 10-minute break before coming back to hear from Rick. Thank you, everybody. The last minute request. I know we still have some people joining us and getting settled. But I'd like to now pass things over to our keynote speaker, Rick Hansen. Bienvenue à nouveau. Je suis ravie de vous présenter maintenant.
Welcome back. I'm now thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Rick Hansen.
And Rick has been a hero of mine. So I turned 40 this year, so your 40th anniversary. But my mom worked with kids with disabilities, and she told me that I would do this type of work in my life too. And Rick was a hero of my mom's and certainly of mine growing up. So I couldn't be more humbled and honored to present Rick. Rick Hansen is a renowned Canadian Paralympian, humanitarian, and disability advocate. He continues to inspire with his passion and dedication to improving accessibility and inclusion for all. We're honored to have him here with us today on the 40th anniversary year of the Man in Motion Tour. Please welcome Rick Hansen.
Well, thanks very much, everybody. It's such an honor to be here. And Megan, thanks for that kind introduction. And it's such a privilege to be able to be here in the city of Ottawa. I just can't believe here we are in the capital city that has such special significance to our country. And for me, growing up, I'll show you on my journey that it is a very special place in my heart. It had a lot of impact on helping open my mind, help build my sense of resiliency and my passion to make a difference. Before I start, I want to say a special thank you to our signers who are here working tirelessly to help bridge the barriers to communication for so many people. And thank you so much for your incredible work. I really appreciate it. You know, barriers, they're everywhere. And some are visible, and many are not. And one of the reasons I'm here in front of you is because I'm trying to overcome a barrier in an opportunity to communicate. Because communication is really about humans together, opening our hearts and our minds, and to be able to do the only thing we really have is share our story. And every one of our stories count. And this is the ability to actually celebrate National Accessibility Week. And this day is a special day. For me, it's incredibly special, but it gives us a chance to be able to look back in our history and celebrate success and lessons and learnings, and to then be able to focus to the future, to be relentless on the pursuit of the Canada that we want and the world in which that we want, an accessible and inclusive world where Canada contributes and learns in that process. And I want to ask you, how many of you still have and understand and see that there are many barriers still to be crossed here for this country and for this community? And yes, so it's a wonderful sort of recognition of the space we create to be able to celebrate our progress and to really, really be grateful, but yet to not be satisfied and not have that be a criticism. It is essentially our duty to continue to move forward. And my earliest memories were like this beautiful world that I grew up in the first few years of my life, you know, always involved on an adventure, physical activity and the use of my legs. And I love to fish. And one day I was hitchhiking home from this fishing trip at the age of 15 when I had just graduated from grade 10. And I got a ride in the back of a pickup truck with the fellow who unfortunately went around a corner, rolled a truck, and he crashed it. A few hours later, I was in this little hospital room in my hometown of Williams Lake, British Columbia, small little town. My family were there. The doctor came in. He told me that I'd broken my back, damaged my spinal cord, and that I'd never walk again. You can imagine the impact that that would have on someone of that age and in that era. It was 1973. And in the era, I was actually growing up to inherit all the biases and the stigmas and the stereotypes that existed in Canada at that time if you had a disability. As a matter of fact, I really didn't know anyone with a disability, but I surely knew that if I couldn't do all that I could and be all that I thought I was, that I would be someone who would be pitied and that there wouldn't be much hope or opportunity. So that burden was with me in that unconscious state as I actually faced my reality, which was essentially to be able to look for painting a new picture from a black canvas of despair to pinpoints of light, color and texture, borders of possibility and hope. And how do we do that? Well, in the era where there was no GPS and no opportunity to Google and to connect through information that was seemingly unlimited and uncurated, it was the old-fashioned way through human connection, through role models and mentors. And for me, this fellow named Stan Strong wheeled into my life. And he had this huge grin on his face, beaming joy. And here I was feeling sorry for myself and looking at him and actually thinking, what is he smiling about? And I had no idea until I got to meet him and realized that he actually was the kind of guy who was not complaining about his circumstance because he was injured in the 30s when people with spinal cord injury didn't survive. And he didn't have a rehabilitation center. And there were barriers everywhere that he and many champions like him had actually tirelessly struggled to be able to remove. And so here I was in the 70s looking at my role model and mentor, Stan Strong, and thinking, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And it isn't what happens to you, it's what you do with it that counts. And it's the space between the pain and suffering and holding the love, the purpose, and the ability, and making sure that that balances out our ability to be resilient and to be empowered as a whole human being. Stan Strong was a powerful influence on me, but he also, using the sport model as the manager of the little wheelchair basketball team called the Vancouver Cable Cars, he was actually one guy who gave up, in service to help others be able to participate in sport. They reminded me that nowhere in the definition of an athlete did it say you had to use your legs in order to be one. That it's about heart, passion, using the chair, powered by your arms maybe, or maybe just by a motor. It doesn't really matter. If you have a body, you are one. And so Stan helped me redefine some of the barriers that I was actually facing. And the biggest barriers to start were the precepts that I had set in my mind. And once I worked on those, I realized that it's a continual journey to be able to assess the assumptions we make that sometimes can be the greatest source of our pain. And my pain wasn't coming from the fact I couldn't use my legs. It was coming from the way I was viewing my circumstance at the age of 16 and many years after. And I had to continue to examine those old precepts, like that you had to be completely independent in order to be whole. What about being interdependent? Or you had to use your legs in order to be an athlete, or that the wheelchair was a symbol of disability. These were all things that were fundamental to me being able to move forward. And my mentor, Stan Strong, also encouraged me to realize that we also don't just take. People don't just show up to be able to provide support for you in your life. You actually have to do what you can to contribute and pay it forward. Find a life purpose in passion and making a difference. And how do we make a difference? At the age of 18, I was tasked by Stan to go out and try to recruit people who wanted to come and play wheelchair basketball and help build the team and provide them with the same chances that I had received. And I ended up getting a phone number of this young man who had just lost his leg to cancer, and he was going to Simon Fraser University, and he used to play basketball. And his name was Terry Fox. I called him up, got him to come out and play for our team. He was an amazing young man. We hit it off right away. We were great friends. We trained together, roomed together, traveled together. And Stan inspired him as well. A life of service, not just taking. Being able to look around, and you don't have to look far to big social media or back then television for celebrities for inspiration. It's usually family, friends, teammates, whoever. And he was empowered, obviously, to do something very special thanks to his engagement in our wheelchair basketball team, which was to maybe one day use his experience and see where pain and suffering was in cancer and try to put his talent in motion to try to hop on one leg across the country. And what an amazing Canadian who was nurtured in a little community team by a role model like Stan and friends like me and many others. And Terry decided that he would actually take this perilous and uncertain journey in that first step, turning westward from Cape Spear, moving towards his home on a dream to make a difference. What an amazing journey. We all looked at that journey. And for me, as a friend, I was cheering him all along until, unfortunately, tragically, he was forced to abandon his journey in Thunder Bay because of the recurrence of cancer. And that was a very, very terrible time. But you know, he didn't finish his physical journey. He was taken from us a year later. But his family, friends, and community took up that journey, and it became a movement across this country and around the world. And people's lives have fundamentally been saved and changed because of one Canadian from a small town who decided to make a difference. And once you start, you never know how far you'll go. He would have never imagined the potential legacy that he would have left by simply just having the courage to try, taking those first few steps. What a friend, what an inspiration, and what a Canadian hero and icon. What do you guys think? Absolutely, eh? Yeah, really phenomenal. Because there's a little bit of Terry Fox in all of us. He isn't, and you wouldn't pick him out of a room. You would not pick him out of a room because he was an everyday average Canadian with extraordinary determination and the passion to make a difference. And that's what I took from Terry as my friend. And he inspired me in many ways. But also, many other people did, like my coach and teacher who said, you can believe anything's possible, but not everything. And if you want to go as far as you can in sport, you need to focus and give everything and see how far you can go. That helped me propel myself through into Paralympic sport and travel the world representing my country. Having a chance to get into the marathon and nurture a dream. Like, not only could I compete as a marathoner, but maybe one day the idea of wheeling around the world might happen. Maybe physically I could. And then coming to Ottawa for my first experience here as a marathon athlete and going to the Ottawa Marathon, it was absolutely amazing to be able to be fully included in that race. It was the first time anyone with a disability was allowed to be in there. And I was thinking, my gosh, maybe we actually can make change as you move forward. I'll never forget that actual poster shot there of being in the marathon and thinking about the fact that sport is a vehicle for social change. And just around that same time, I hadn't known this as a youngster, but there were so many champions who actually were believing in human rights in this country, social justice, and they had been tirelessly working on not only human rights laws, but they had been thinking and working with the Constitution as it was actually about to be repatriated back here, our own Constitution, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And they actually embedded in that the covenant, which absolutely identified people with disabilities as being equal in our society. And this is one of the first countries in the entire planet that actually brought that statement and embedded it in the country and the Canada we want. What a powerful statement. And as much as those efforts were appreciated, those words were the easiest part. They're the most enabling and powerful. But to be able to speak that with the work that had to be done, it was actually almost like, are you serious? can we really do that? And then, of course, all of us coming in behind, benefiting from that incredible statement, because once you can state it, you can see it, you can make it happen. And ultimately, it was a long, multi-generational journey. And so many things have happened since then. You know, for me as an athlete, I crashed, injured my shoulder. I was actually be able to get back to be part of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I couldn't have imagined actually being at those games and being at the highest point of my athletic experience. But when I crashed, the doctors were trying to actually tell me I couldn't actually be at those games and that I should abandon my dream of trying to wheel around the world. And it's interesting, you know, when you have people trying to impose their views on your potential. And I was almost ready to believe them, but I was introduced to a physiotherapist who didn't believe that. She said, Rick, let's see how far you can go. She treated my shoulder and then my heart, and I ended up marrying her. And that was the best injury I ever had. Eh? Yeah. And truly, her expertise and passion brought me against all odds to be able to be at the Olympic Games as part of a first inclusion of athletes with disabilities in the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in 1984. And isn't it interesting how we view things? Sport, it's not just a game, it's actually a reflection of our values as a society. The values can be good or bad, and sport isn't about just two classes of people, able-bodied and disabled. It's one class, athletes. And why would we want to be able to promote such barriers through sport when we have a chance for promoting inclusion? And I felt that moment to be a very powerful statement that everyone belonged. Now, since then, of course, the Paralympic Games have emerged and become closer and connected to the Olympics. But I wonder in the future how far that message will translate to the point where we don't see people coming together at the Olympic level just because they have a disability. It's because they're athletes, and the message is powerful and important. So when you're at the podium and you're celebrating success, you can't help but be filled with gratitude. There I was a decade later, you know, at the Paralympic Games, winning a marathon and feeling so grateful. So grateful for my coach, my friends, Stan Strong, Terry Fox, my about-to-be wife, Amanda. And I knew that I had to be able to start thinking about another way to be able to make a difference, put my talent in my old dream of wheeling around the world as an adventure with a purpose. In a time in the 80s when it was hard to think about someone in a wheelchair wheeling across the street on their own, what about wheeling around the world and showing the potential of people with disabilities if barriers were removed? And then to ask people to speak to their local community champions and see what was in their way. And speaking about that was easy, but trying to make it happen was very difficult. There were a lot of barriers, skepticism, self-doubt, and pulling a little team together. And we worked all day to actually have the greatest moment of that entire journey, that first day when they put all their spare equipment in the motorhome, and it was basically overloaded. And then so they built a crate, put it on top of the motorhome. I went through this group of people. You can see that crate up there, and they're waving, and they're all excited. But they were about to find out as we were there at this sort of opening, and there was the premier of the province was there. Betty and Rolly Fox were there, Terry's mom. They gave me a miniature statue of the maquette of Terry at Thunder Bay that was erected from where he was forced to abandon his journey. And then I made my way through the crowd out in the parking lot through this tunnel, and the crowd was cheering, and the guys were trying to catch up to me in that motorhome, and they just got in front of the tunnel. There was an overheight warning bar that was hanging down on chains. And what did they do? Well, instead of turning around and finding an easier exit, one that was accessible, they lifted the bar up for the motorhome to pass through, and they just crashed right on national television. You can imagine the confidence of those well-wishers. This guy's going around the world in a wheelchair. You can't even get in the parking lot. Good luck. Isn't that the way it works when we have our big dreams? And yeah, second day on the road, pouring rain, sleet, snow, wheeling 113 kilometers a day, 3 wheeling segments. Second day, I was injured, tendonitis to the wrists and the elbows. And I was in the back of the motorhome, completely overwhelmed, thinking about quitting. And, you know, I just made a commitment. But make sure you have no regrets if you're going to walk away from it. And so I made the decision, not in the comfort of the warm motorhome, but I got out and I got into that cold steel chair, put on the wet, slimy gloves, and pushed out from behind the protection and asked myself if I had one more stroke. And one more stroke led to another, then next thing you know, there was 12 hours later and I was celebrating the end of the second day, still in the hunt for my dream. Was I ever glad I asked myself if I had one more stroke? No regrets. It was that close back then. And of course, symbols of success are important on the journey, just as this day is a symbol of success on the long journey. For me, it was things like the Golden Gate Bridge, you know, being able to wheel across there as we made our way down the West Coast, or maybe, just maybe, as we see the beaches and you have to keep going, maybe someone would be able to create a theme song that would become like an anthem. And we were introduced to David Foster, the great Canadian music composer, and he actually was doing the theme song to the movie St. Elmo's Fire, but he wasn't inspired by the movie. He and John Parr were, they were looking for inspiration, and they actually put on our little tape, and that translated into the entire song St. Elmo's Fire, Man in Motion, which actually traveled around the world as a #1 hit with us. And so I was super grateful for David's inspiration and contribution to bringing our journey to life in a different way. And going to the other parts of the world were an eye-opener for me, even though I traveled as a Paralympian, and my experiences meeting thousands of people like me who had challenges. You know, going there as an athlete was one thing, but going there on a global journey, again, with no technology and trying to organize and coordinate 16 countries in 6 months through Europe. I mean, going through, whether it's, you know, seeing, you know, things in London, you know, whether it was going into Paris and the Eiffel Tower, or into Red Square in Moscow, or coming through Eastern Bloc countries. I mean, we were just always meeting new people, but new languages, and getting lost, and, you know, having to delay because of all kinds of unforeseen circumstances, and everything seemed to be going wrong. And it was a struggle, but it's every single day. But you look for moments of success. And for me, it was going through a small town in Poland, and this community had really emerged to welcome me. And there was a young man who came pushing out on a pillow, on a piece of plywood, on a skateboard set of wheels with his gloves, and he had his legs crossed, and he pushed up, and there he was talking to his community. And then he mentioned to me, steaming tears of joy, "Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, because this is the first time my family and community are looking at me with ability. Keep going. Keep going." Yeah. So those are the little things you look for when everything else is going wrong. And you know, the dream and reality seem like so elusive. And you see these other symbols, though, like, you know, like the construction in Rome with the Colosseum, and imagine what things would have been back then for people with disabilities, and it puts it all in perspective. And yet you look for moments of inspiration to be able to be blessed by the Pope at a time when we were really struggling. And how would I have known back then that he would be soon to struggle himself with Parkinson's disease and still find a way to lead, to pursue his passion and purpose? And so while he was inspiring me, I and others were eventually inspiring him, and it's a full circle relationship and connection. And the Allenby Bridge between Jordan and Israel at a time of war sounds familiar. And there was tension, and disabled veterans from both sides who were injured in conflict, ceasing conflict to help a Canadian with a message that the world is more connected, that disability knows no bounds, and that they could actually find common ground together and help me wheel from Jordan and Israel and help cross boundaries between cultures and religion. And that was super inspiring. And it's made me believe, seeing people from places in the world, it makes me believe that we have much more hope and there is much more goodness and connectivity than what we are hearing today is the fragmentation and the divide and the anger and the disappointment. And we have to balance that in a mindful way with our hearts and knowing that we model the way ourselves in our own responsibility every single day. And that experience for me was good, but it also puts it in perspective because you're on this powerful mission, right, to make a difference. And you go around a corner in New Zealand, and these guys, they don't care. They just sit there and go, "We're just gonna cross the road here, man. Like, keep going, whatever. I don't care." But Australia was halfway, like crossing 20,000 kilometers on the journey. And every stroke at that halfway moment was one stroke closer to home. If you've done it once, you can do it again. And these milestones on the journey are so important because otherwise it just seems too heavy and there's a chance to burn out and to lose perspective. And that was super important. We were accepted in the country of China when other countries, hadn't, that from a communist perspective. And I was so blown away and curious as to why. Because one of the dreams I had was to be able to actually wheel up the highest point of the Great Wall and be up on the wall and celebrate that moment. And there I was, on that wall and being able to actually receive that recognition and thinking that little picture would be the one thing I'd have with me in my mind as a volunteer. And it is in my closet. And I do open the door once in a while and turn on the light and remind myself that there are no barriers too big that can't be crossed. But also, this team shot is the most powerful one because they carried me up the stairs of the Great Wall, which I didn't understand there were stairs because that wasn't in the National Geographic photos. And they carried me every stroke of the way. And so did the thousands of others. And so this photo here is the team together in purpose, in service, was the most powerful memento of that journey. And through China, I couldn't believe how people responded. Millions of people from Beijing to Shanghai. In the city of Tianjin, there was just like this crowd of people that emerged to see, is it possible that a person with a disability wasn't a burden, a shut out, a ward of state, but could actually lead and that could be included? A message that was very foreign at that point. And the only reason that happened was because our prime minister at the time, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, had befriended the chairman of China, Deng Xiaoping, and his son had had a spinal cord injury and he needed life-saving medical treatment. And he came here to Ottawa to get treated with Canadian blood and Canadian values. And his inspiration came back and he decided to champion the Disabled Persons Federation and embed the movement towards rights in that country for people with disabilities. And how do we know, right, when we make a difference in some kind way? And so my journey continued, and meeting people like Michael J. Fox coming up the East Coast, and he was filming Family Ties, and he says, "Rick, come on, Canadians are behind you." And I was wondering whether Canadians would care enough, after all this time. I was worried, and he was right, because in Cape Fear, Newfoundland, all across the country, people responded. Everywhere I went, young people coming out to contribute either finances or, more importantly, to think about disability, being able to think about what was possible as you come through Ottawa, our capital city, and being awarded the keys of the city by the mayor. Like, it was so cool. I was like, wow, this is neat. What do the keys to the city get you anyway? Is that key still relevant? I got to ask the mayor. Or, big events, that are there, encouraging. And then, of course, at Parliament Hill with thousands of people and the Prime Minister giving $1 million on behalf of Canadians. Actually, that check that he dropped in the bucket went missing for a while, and we all worried someone walked off with it. But it was a local volunteer who actually put it in his pocket for safekeeping. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. But coming across the country in the middle of winter, minus 50 below zero, adapting to special clothing, a four-wheel drive chair that propelled me forward, and ultimately having a chance to be able to keep moving no matter what, ice, snow, wind, temperatures. And the thing that kept me moving most were that people would actually come out on the street and wait in that temperature for a chance to say hi, to wave. And this photo of this young man meeting me and seeing in his eyes like hope, possibility. And he thought, well, if Rick can do that, I can be a teacher, I can be a business person, I can be a politician, I can do anything. And isn't that what we want if barriers are removed? And ultimately, it was a special moment for me. And I'm super grateful for those, because that's where the energy comes from, is those little glimpses. And those last few days where the dream and reality were the same, like thousands of people in the streets, amazing group of folks at BC Place. And then that last moment, the same place I started and ended 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days later, crossing the barrier during the speeches. As the speeches were going on, they had a little piece of banner there that I was supposed to break through symbolically, and a puff of wind blew and it prematurely collapsed. And so they had to go and lean over and hold it. And I thought, well, what the heck, you might as well start the way we, finish the way we started, with something unforeseen happening. I crashed through it, and went, yes, and thinking we're done. And then I looked behind me and I saw this banner, and it says, welcome home, Rick. And what's that above that? The end is just the beginning. Don't they realize what kind of crazy marketing person put that up there? I mean, tour is over, man. I'm kind of done. But then you think about it and you go, hey, yeah, of course. Like, sure, we created some awareness, we'd raised some money, but against the hill, the Mount Everest of social change. I mean, it was just like a little tiny grain of sand in a desert of need, and more had to happen, much more. Not just me, but all of us, to continue to move forward in our own way. And when I finished, the Prime Minister asked me, he said, Rick, what can we do as Canadians? What can I do as a federal government, here to help move things forward? And I turned to him and I said, Prime Minister, you can actually declare a national week, a week that continues to be a focal point where people focus on local champions, their message, their challenges, celebrate success, and plan for the next year, and make this a cultural happening so that people can see our community, understand the power of it, and no one will ever have to wheel around the world again to draw attention to this issue, and we'll normalize this. And so he declared that National Access Awareness Week, which is now transformed into National AccessAbility Week, which is the same progression of our society. Back then it was about general awareness. It always will be, but it's moving into the removal of barriers to focus on ability. And I'm really excited about that transformation. But it started back there, here in Ottawa, thanks to that ongoing relationship. And there were a few people that were brought in to make that happen. And this photo here shows the beginning of some folks who championed that. And I'd like to highlight at least two of them. Daryl Rock is the young bright-eyed bush